Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of our professional development series. My name is Leon Lazarus from the U.S. Embassy, and first and foremost, I want to thank the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors for joining with us for putting on this awesome 3-part professional development series. Now, on Monday, we talked about being succinct and successful, resume writing, and we had Jamila Hollingsworth from the HR Boss and Dwayne Henriksen, who is the CARICOM Youth Ambassador for St. Kitts and Nevis, give us some awesome nuggets of wisdom. So if you guys haven't seen part 1, I definitely suggest you go on our Facebook and rewatch that. Also, anybody who is tuning in from Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, please comment on our Facebook right now. Let us know where you're hailing from, and we'll say hi to you. Now, today we are focusing on prep and practice, tips for the interview. And we are joined with 2 incredible experts on the topic. The first we have is Tiffany Jones. Tiffany is Managing Director of The Job Connect, a career consultancy that helps clients find jobs and establish careers that allow them to achieve their personal and professional goals. I definitely suggest that you guys read an article on medium.com about how Tiffany started, how her first client was a young person who was really at his wit's ends. He couldn't find a job, and he was even contemplating ending his own life. And she helped turn his life around by providing job skills, helping him write his resume, and getting him back on his feet. So, Tiffany, you are a true hero. Tiffany also holds a bachelor's in science and social work from the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus, and an MBA in human resources from Edinburgh Napier University, and has a certificate in law for human resources practitioners. Joining Tiffany is my partner in crime, Chad Monnerville. Chad is one of the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors for Barbados. He's also a valuation surveyor for BCQS in Barbados. He is responsible for residential and commercial appraisals, as well as fund monitoring of residential construction loan for public and private sector clients, both locally and internationally. Chad is a first-class honors graduate from the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus, and he's also a part-time lecturer at UE Cave Hill campus, and he's deputy chairman of Erdeston Teachers Training College. But I've also seen him all over the place, working with UNDP, Ministry of Education, and various other projects. And so without further ado, I give to you, Tiffany and Chad.
Thank you very much, Leland.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction and for having us this afternoon. We wouldn't rather be anywhere else. So our time is short. We have 1 hour to give you tips, tricks, and strategies on how to prepare and practice for your interviews. And before we get deep into our presentation, we just want to enlighten you on 2 things that we really think are key when you are preparing for your interviews. Before you even get the call, how you should go about it. So one thing, we're going to go to our next slide. One thing that we would strongly recommend is for you to create an online database of all of the jobs that you would have applied to. As soon as you send in those applications, I want you, before the day is out, to jot down the name of the company, the job that you applied for, the link, if you can, or the image of the job ad itself, as well as the date. And the reason for this is quite simple. You want that when you're called for the interview, to help you with your practice, you would need to go back over that job ad. So we want that you can have that information to hand, because it will prove very useful when you actually prepare for that interview. And the second thing we want you to consider before you get that interview call is your telephone etiquette. So we want you to make sure that every time you answer your telephone, whether you believe it, you know who it is or not, because practice is key. Every time you answer your telephone, we want you to be courteous and to sound professional. There are many instances that I can tell you about where persons answer the phone and it's not in the best manner. And then when you identify yourself as the recruiter, things automatically the tone of their voice changes. And believe you me, we definitely take note of that, and not in a positive light. So you most definitely want to make sure that you have pristine phone etiquette before your interviews. Our next slide. So most of you are familiar with the panel style interview, but there are many different types. There's the panel, of course. It's virtual now, and especially because of COVID, a lot of companies are utilizing virtual recruitment and onboarding. There's also the group setting. Many people may not be familiar with this, but there are companies that do group interviews. And this style of interview, you have to make sure that you stand out because you are competing with others. Yes, you always are in an interview, but now specifically, you are in their space at the same time as them. So you don't want to be overshadowed by your other competitors, so to speak. So the group interview will probably be something that you will see a bit more of as hiring practitioners increasingly get more and more busy. There's also the telephone interview that a lot of companies use to pre-screen candidates. So this is essentially what we would use to decide whether we want to meet you face to face or not. And for us, this saves a lot of time. So you want to make sure that you stand out there. And we're definitely going to be showing you how to do that. And of course, the behavioral and the competency-based interviews, we will delve much deeper into those as we go through this presentation today. Those have become especially common, especially when you are thinking about a global market. We're thinking outside the box, outside of where we live. Those two interviews are pivotal for you to be able to ace those cells. Next slide. I'll hand over to Chad.
Oh, right. Thank you very much. As Leland mentioned, on Monday we actually started this series, and one of the things that certainly that I took note of is to conduct your research, and this would have been mentioned even by Jamila and Dwayne previously. And whenever you're going to apply to a company or a particular industry, you want to always conduct your research. Again, you want to conduct research about the company itself, and you want to conduct research about the industry. Then you want to practice questions, because during that interview process, there are going to be questions, and they're going to be generic questions that the HR personnel are going to answer. And there are many resources which Tiffany can point you to with respect to those generic questions that they look for. But practice makes perfect. You know the old adage, if you don't practice, if you practice, then you certainly succeed. And conversely, if you don't practice, then it's going to be very difficult for you to succeed. So always practice. And then once you conduct your research and you do your practice, certainly we would want for you to ask the right questions. Asking the right questions is key, because it shows that, yes, you have a knowledge of the industry, you have a knowledge of the company, and it therefore speaks volumes for you. And speaking of speaking volumes, you want to speak with confidence. You are at the interview because your CV or your resume that you provided stood out, so that they now call for you to do an interview. So you want to speak with confidence. You want to emit the skills and the knowledge that you wrote down on that CV or resume, and you want to tell that interview panel or that interviewer, this is me. I am the person you saw on that CV. So speak with confidence. Secondly, or fifthly, I should say, listen and listen, listen, listen. Many times we're doing interviews, both as an interviewer and as an interviewee. You always want to listen, because the worst thing is for you to answer a question which the person didn't ask. It doesn't look good, and it doesn't speak good for you at all. So you want to listen. And again, you want to be flexible. Yes, we know you're going to be nervous, so you're gonna have your prepared questions and responses and so on. But always be prepared and be confident in your ability to answer that curveball question. And if you're too nervous and you're not flexible, then it's going to really throw you off. Again, you want to be relevant and you want to be concise. So yes, we want you to expound upon what you have on your CV or your resume, but we want you to do so in a succinct manner, where you get all the information express. And again, confidence, confidence, confidence. We want you to emit confidence, however, not being egotistic or arrogant. Just speak of yourself in a very confident manner. So because confidence you can feel confidence. You generally know when someone is confident, and that goes well for one, putting yourself at ease, and equally for putting the interviewer or the interview panel at ease as well. Next slide. Okay, so how to prove that you're right for the job? So actually, this is one rule that I learned about from Tiffany, because she's really the expert here. The 70-30 rule, the what and the why. This is a technique that HR practitioners use, where 70% of the time that you're being interviewed is actually for you to speak, and the 30% is for the interview panel to ask you questions. So it's really about you. So if you're doing an interview for 10 minutes, 7 minutes of that time is allocated for you to speak. And again, during that 70% of the interview time, you want to be able to show that you are competent and what you have on your CV or resume is actually factual. So again, we want you to focus on achievements. And for those who would have been on the webinar on Monday, I can remember Jamila and Dwayne speaking about your achievements, whether it is that you was selected for one of the embassy programs, whether it is that you have a professional designation, or you would have done work in the community, or you would have appointed to any government boards, etc., etc. All of these are achievements which speaks to your ability, not only as a professional, but a moral citizen who is sound in civics and so on. Again, you want to highlight your skills. Many HR practitioners are cognizant of the fact that there will be perhaps gaps in persons' CVs or resumes, particularly from 2019 and 2020, but they want to know, what have you done during the time that you weren't employed, or you were perhaps on limited hours per week, or whatever the case may be. Because this speaks to the fact that you're proactive, that you're not just sitting at home waiting on a check to come in, but you're actually using that downtime to gain skills and to gain knowledge, so that you retool and you retrain yourself, so that whenever you then enter back the workforce, you're optimum to contribute to the workforce and to contribute to society at large. Another thing, we want you to match yourself to the job ad. Again, this can, in a sense, save some heartache, and also save some time in terms of applying to just a whole bunch of jobs. You want to go through and make sure that what is the requirements, whether it is that they say they need a bachelor's or master's or whatever the case may be, or if you have the experience, if you can show that in this particular job that I was in, I was actually interfacing with clients. So that speaks to my interpersonal skills, which can then translate into sales. Or I would have led X team, a team of 20, 50 people, and therefore it speaks to my ability to manage and so on and so forth. So try as much as possible to show the lineage or the synergies with respect to the job requirements, so your experience, which will go or certainly speak volumes for you in terms of your ability to get that job. And then we go on to the STAR method, which I'll let Tiffany expound upon.
Yes, next slide. So this is very important. I want you to grab your pen, your paper if you don't already have that, or if you have your mobile device and you can screenshot this acronym. I need you to make sure that this is ingrained in your memory, the STAR technique. This is a really good technique for answering those competency and behavioral interview questions. And as I would have mentioned earlier, in the Caribbean, there are still a lot of companies that, you know, as Chad would have alluded to, go through the generic interview questions, but then there are also still quite a few, and it's increasing, who utilize competency-based and behavioral questions, because this certainly helps us as interview practitioners to weed out, you know, the best candidates. So what does STAR mean? STAR, as you can see, situation. So we want you to set the scene. When you answer a question, set the scene for the interviewer. Let them know what happened. You're painting a picture, you're telling a story. So we want you to explain to us what the situation was. A common mistake that a lot of persons make here is that they run on too long. And we don't want you to do that because we are all busy. We all have things to do. We don't want to lose track of what you're saying. So what is the issue at hand? The T is for task. What were you supposed to do? What was expected of you? A, action. What did you do? As a result of the issue that you were faced with or the situation that you were in, what was your action? And R for results. What was the outcome of your action? And this is where you want to spend most of your time, explaining to the hiring managers what you did and why it benefited the situation. And Jamila and Dwayne would have underscored the importance on Monday of achievements on your resume. So, of course, because of what they told you, you would have gone and already started to, improve on your document. And so that landed you the interview. When you get into that interview, we want you to be able to explain that achievement. And this is the acronym that will help you do that, the STAR technique. So there are a few questions that I can share with you that would get you thinking of how you can incorporate this technique into your answers. So the first one that is mentioned here, tell me about a time you dealt with a disgruntled customer. So this is especially a common one for customer service representative, persons who are customer facing, or even if you work in back office, but you deal with customers. So when you think about the acronym that I would have just explained, I'm sure that you're seeing the picture that we are trying to paint here. The issue that you had with the customer would be the situation. The task would be what was expected of you in that particular situation, with the disgruntled customer. What action did you take to resolve this situation? And what was the result of that action? Did you actually resolve it? Was the customer happy at the end of it? Were they, did you dissolve the situation? What was your result? And that in itself can be an achievement. Yeah. So you want to pay particular attention to that. The next question, describe a time you made a mistake at work. Now, again, a common error here that many persons make is that they go on and on about the error, the mistake, but you don't end it on a positive note. Your positive note with this STAR technique is the result. So don't focus on just the issue, but as a result of coming out of that situation, the mistake that you made, what ended, what was the end result, what happened? And were you able to implement any process or anything that could circumvent that from happening again? So focus on the positive, what came out of it that would benefit you and the company. And of course, describe a time that you experienced a challenging situation. The same principle applies here. So I want you to remember this technique, the STAR technique. This is very important. And this is what a lot of recruiters are looking for when we ask you these type of questions. So I want you to remember that we want you to give us the essentials of the issue. But once again, and I'm repeating this again because it's very important, and I know a lot of people mess up in this point, focus on the result. Next slide.
Ooh, so this is an actually a very interesting one. So what we'll do here now is that Tiffany will play the interviewer and I'll be the interviewee, and we'll give you a kind of a guide on how you should answer some of these questions, which are common questions that would usually come in an interview.
Yeah, so we're going to have some fun here. So as you can see, these are the questions that Chad would have mentioned earlier, the general, questions from interviewers. And we decided to highlight especially the ones that persons usually have challenges with answering. And those are the ones that we're going to go through this afternoon with you. So Chad is interviewing, just let me set the scene. Chad is interviewing for an analyst position in the economics department of ABC Company. So I just want you to remember that, and as he responds to these questions that I'm going to ask him. So we're already in the room. We've already shook hands and everything. We're now seated. So I want you to see that picture. And here we
No
go.
pressure.
No pressure, Chad. None at all. So, Chad, I'm really glad that you joined us this afternoon for this opportunity to interview for the analyst position in our economics department. We're really happy to have you. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Certainly. So when we looked at your resume, we were indeed impressed by what we saw. But before I get into interviews, I like to learn more about who I'm speaking to. So tell me a bit about yourself.
Well, I am a numerically driven individual with a keen interest in the economics at the community level and how that feeds up to the macro level. Hence my interest in economic development and interest as an analyst at XYZ company. In my civic duty, I do participate in community aspects, both in the church as well as serving on boards and in the community. But aside from when I'm not doing research as an analyst or serving in the community, I also enjoy time on the tennis courts or walking with my dog, Snow. um, so what I try to do there is that I try to split it in the sense of academics, then in the sense of community, and then in the sense of a sense of a person in itself. Because at the HR personnel, they know all of the academics, they know all of the things, but they want to see you as a fulsome person. So that's why I try to break it down into those three, but very succinct responses. How was that?
Yeah, so that was a good response. High five, Chad. So,
Hey.
So yes, as Chad broke it down for you just now, he started with his education, his experience, and a bit about himself as a person. Now, this is a holistic approach, and it is the one that you should go with, especially too because you are not sure sometimes what they're expecting. You know, some people see this as a very vague question, but if you answer it holistically, you touch all of the points that are possible. So if they wanted to know about you personally, you gave them a bit about that. If they want to see you represent yourself and speak about your accomplishments and your career history, you also did that. So you've covered all the bases. So that's a great response, Chad.
Thank you.
So another question that we find persons may fall a bit in is the weaknesses question. What are your weaknesses? Obviously, you know, most persons are usually good with the strengths. And this again goes back to the importance of having an online database of all the jobs that you would have applied for. You need to track this information because when you answer a question like this, the best way to answer it is to know what they're asking for. And you are not going to know that if you've applied for a job 6 months ago, because again, we're in COVID right now, and a lot of persons were taken away from the hiring, but now they're gone back to it. So you might get a call a couple months later and you cannot find that job ad anywhere. So once you've saved that ad, you can answer these questions by reviewing the ad. What are the core competencies that they listed out in that ad? Once you match up to those, you can list those back as some of your skills. Obviously, you're not going to do this verbatim. And you would also want to remember your soft skills here as well. Very important. But for the weaknesses, we tend to get persons who would go on and on about what their weakness is, or persons who are perfect, so they don't have any weaknesses. So Chad is gonna outline to you how best you can answer that question.
Oh, it's very simple. I don't have any weaknesses. That is a no. You do not want to say that.
Not at all.
All right. So again, we're still in the context that I'm applying for a role as an economics analyst.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to ask the question so then I can respond? So
Sure.
you go ahead.
Sure. Why not? So Chad, tell me about your weaknesses. What do you think you're not the best at?
Well, I'm conscious of the fact that we exist in a globalized environment, and as an analyst who wants to cover the Barbados market and the Latin American market, I consider one of my weaknesses to be my lack of proficiency in Spanish. Currently, I am at level 1, and I'm currently doing after school training to make sure that by next year I can be fluent in Spanish. So by then, hopefully, I can make that weakness a strength.
Okay. End scene. So I'm not sure if you picked up what Chad did there. Yes, he mentioned a weakness, but he did two things. He mentioned a weakness that does not have a negative impact on his probability of getting the job, and two, he ended by saying what he was doing to overcome the weakness. So you don't want to, again, going back to the STAR method, you don't want to highlight a weakness and that's it. You want to end by saying what you're doing. So he understands that, especially in this time, you need to have a second language, and Jamila and Dwayne on Monday would have also emphasized that fact. You need to have a second language. So in understanding that, he realizes that it's not his strong suit, and so he's doing something about it, right? So that is how you want to approach that question in your interviews. And it is important to not choose weaknesses that are, don't try to mask your strength as a weakness. I find this is something that persons do, and it sometimes comes over as not genuine. So you want to pay attention to that as well. So another question that we thought we would highlight: why are you leaving? Why do you want to leave your current place of employment? Now, we're both smiling because we would have discussed that this is a question people tend to use to bash their current or former employer. And that is not something you want to do. So remember, I would have mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that you want to stand out. But the truth is that you only want to stand out for the right reasons, for the positive things. You don't want to stand out because you're remembered as the person that spoke really ill of their current or former employer. So how do you answer a question like this? We'll get into that right now. So Chad, I noticed that you're still working at ABC Company. Why do you want to leave there?
Thank you very much for the question. ABC was actually a very good company. I've gained a lot of experience at that company, and I've been there since I actually graduated as a young undergraduate. However, after, let's say, 5-10 years of experience there, I think that I've reached a plateau in terms of the challenges that are afforded to me. And I think now is the correct time to pivot into an industry which will provide new challenges and new opportunities for me to grow as a professional and to bolster my career, both to the benefit of this new company and to society at large.
Good answer. So he didn't even, okay, so you might be working somewhere that you just do not like the environment. You cannot stand your colleagues. You don't like how management operates. You cannot mention those things in an interview, please. Even if the facial reactions remain the same, it is most definitely noted in the mind of the interviewer. So the strategy that Chad just used was to highlight, the fact that he has a pretty good employer, he likes where he works. He emphasized the importance of the fact that it actually aided in his professional development. So he paid kudos to his employer, but then he rationalized why he wanted to leave. And nobody can fault you for the reason that Chad gave, but you want to make sure that your responses also are very genuine. And for school leavers, a lot of these questions obviously you may not necessarily be able to relate to them because you may not have the experience. But in cases such as that, we want you to set the scene of what you would do if you were in a position such as the situations that we would have outlined just now and earlier, especially too with the STAR methodology. So even if you never dealt with a disgruntled customer, what would you do if you were faced with a disgruntled customer? How would you approach that situation? So even though you may not have the experience, you've gotten the interview, so it shows that they see something in you. Remember to speak hypothetically. Don't just say, well, I never did XYZ. What would you do? It shows your critical thinking skills. So you want to remember that as well. And the last one that we're going to demonstrate to you, what are your salary expectations? And we know this is a question that a lot of people fear at the Job Connect. We do interview coaching, and people are always afraid of this question. They're not sure how to answer it. So Chad and I will now demonstrate. So Chad, we had an opportunity to discuss just now, we went through some questions, and we like how you represented yourself, but in terms of the salary that you're expecting, what is your figure?
Can I have $1 million a month?
Why not? Hired.
All right. So, guys, that is not the way you want to answer that.
No.
All right. Wusa. Um, well, I am aware, because I'm answering this question from a position of a person who is transitioning careers, so you do have a level of experience and so on. I am aware that the company would have a range of salaries for this particular position. Obviously, based upon the skills and experience that I've presented to you today, where would you consider that I will fit within that range?
Okay, so I'll let you in on a secret. The average company already knows what they're going to pay, right? Even if they don't have an exact figure, they have an idea. I mean, the average company has an accountant, somebody that manages the finances, so they know what they can afford. But the truth is that we want to hear from you. So let's say now this was a pre-screening phone interview. That salary question is one that persons use to help them as well in terms of reducing the amount of candidates that progress through the recruitment stage. So if your salary is way above what we are able to afford to pay you, then we know we can't really get any further. So that isn't going to work. And let's say now the salary is way below what we can pay. Everybody's not going to say, well, we said we would budget $50,000 a year, so let's still pay the 50,000 even though she asked for 20. Everybody isn't going to do that. They will give you the 20 and save that 30,000 annually. So what Chad did was to throw back the question on the interviewer. He outlined to the interviewer, the fact that we had the conversation, what I am able to bring. And so based on that, what are you offering? No, we're not saying that answer will automatically get you a figure, because the truth is that the average company will give you a range at that time. But then there's some that still wouldn't. They will still throw back the question to you. So in that event, you would give them a range. But I always tell persons, make sure that the lowest end of your range is something that you are truly willing to accept on the job, because we don't want that you take the job just because you wanted the job, and then when things get a little tough, you tell yourself, well, they don't pay me enough, I work too hard for this little bit of money. So make sure that it is something that you're truly willing to accept. But that is how you can go about answering that question. Chat, next slide. Yeah.
Oh, right. So, because asking the right questions is important, I think I will touch on this in my preamble earlier, where I told you that you want to carry out your research with respect to both the company and the industry itself. So, some questions that you want to ask at the interview is, who will be my direct manager and what is their management style like? Because you want to know the person that you're reporting to. Equally, you want to know if that person is a very friendly person, approachable person, especially for the young graduate who wants to soak in as much information as possible as they can. You want to know if that person directly above the chain of command for you, if that is someone that you can go to and learn from in a very friendly way. Then again, you want to know what type of culture does the department have. Again, we're in the COVID environment. Does the company or the department facilitate remote working? Is that something that's frowned upon? Does the company do workouts on the evening together? All of these kind of things that builds a lot of camaraderie and good social environment for the company. And then you want to know, what is the structure of the department? Is the company and the department a very hierarchical structure, or do you have several functioning managers that you will need to report to? Because this again also allows you to know, where do I need to spend my time in terms of checking all the boxes. And speaking of boxes, if you look on the graph there, we have think outside the box. Again, I can't stress this enough. With respect to the questions, you want your questions to be genuine. Yes, there are many questions out there that you can find online that you can answer and will sound really, really good. But experienced HR practitioners have heard these questions 1,010,000 times answered. So especially in an environment where so many persons may have a similar qualifications and both would have done well in the interview. Perhaps that one question which shows that you have really done a lot of research in the company and you're really passionate about working in this environment, that one question that was outside the box can set you apart. So again, ask the right questions and think outside the box with respect to both the company and the industry.
Absolutely, absolutely accurate. So, extra tips, what we want to leave with you in terms of being in the interview. We want you to walk with the right items. So, you're not going to remember everything, and we're going to get into the after effects of the interview. So, a notebook and a pen is important, and we'll get into that very shortly. It's not a classroom, so we're not expecting you to sit and literally write so every single thing that is being said, but jot very short notes that will help you. We want you to arrive on time, but not too early. So we don't need you there an hour early. We don't need you there 30 minutes early in the office. What I recommend is to make sure you're in the vicinity or in their car park at least 30 minutes before, and then report to the office 15 minutes ahead of time. No, we want you to be nice to everybody, especially if you're going for a leadership role, a customer service role, a people engagement role. You want to make sure that you exhibit your personality and your professionalism before you even get into that room. So be nice to everybody from entry level all the way up. Very important. You do not know who you're speaking to when you get on site, and you may very well be speaking to someone that may be interviewing you, and you don't want to come over as a person that is different to who you will then exhibit in the interview. It must match. You also want to manage your nerves. No, I wouldn't say that being nervous isn't, you know, a thing that most people have, but I want you to remember what is at stake. When you get nervous, remember what you stand to gain, and if you fall up due to your nervousness, what you stand to lose. Remember the goal at sight. This is for you to remember who you are, what you will bring to this position, why they need you, and that should help you as you fight those nerves in that interview. No, handshake, especially for my females, is very important. A firm handshake at all times, from the elbow down, nice and firm. It will be noticed even if it is not mentioned. Maintain good eye contact, and if having eyeball to eyeball eye contact makes you nervous and adds to the nerves, consider looking between the forehead, so right here between the eyes, or somewhere around here on the forehead itself. It gives the illusion that you're looking at us when you really are not, but it helps because you look like you're communicating from your eyes all the way. And remember, as Chad said, to be convincing and confident selves. Next slide. So
Ooh.
Chad will go in about the gentleman. He'll give you some more insight on that.
Dress for success. Very, very, very important. Again, you're called to the interview because your CV or your resume stood out, and now it's your time to present yourself. So on this graphic here, I'll say it immediately. I consider this to be a no-no. I'm not sure if we have it zoom in. I'm not sure how it's showing up on your screen, but immediately we have a guy wearing a pair of moccasins and no socks, some slacks, a waist jacket, a very bold tie. It is a real mixed match, in my opinion. Generally speaking, I do advise persons that if you're going to interview, you want to be either formal, wear formal, you wear a dress pants, dress shoes, a dress shirt, a tie, and a jacket. If you don't have a well-tailored jacket, then you can wear the dress pants, the shoes, a nice dress shirt, and a tie. Or at the very least, you can wear business casual, which would be the dress pants, a nice pair of dress shoes, a dress shirt, and no tie, but you have on a blazer. And that is at the minimum that I tell people. I know sometimes persons will say, "Well, I'm only going to apply for a job as, I don't know, working in the supermarket or whatever the case may be, so I can go and shop in a jeans and a t-shirt." I say that is a no-no. You always, I actually saw something, I think it was last week, which it said you dress how you want to be addressed. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, because outside of me wearing formal clothes, you can also catch me in a short pants and a pair of Crocs. And it doesn't mean that you will address me different than you would address me if I'm wearing a suit. But in short, what it means is that don't dress for the position. Dress how you see yourself if outside of that position. So again, you want to be either business casual or formal. In this environment, is for on the picture we have there is a bit of a, oh, should I go formal or should I go casual? So it's a real mix match. So that is a no-no. Either formal or business casual if you're going to interview.
Yeah. Next slide. So for my females on this Facebook Live, you have a lot of things that you have to be conscious of. Your hair, you don't want a color that is too low, too prominent. You don't want a hairstyle that for the interviewer might be a bit distracting. And this goes back to, as Chad would have mentioned earlier, conducting your research on the company. So this also would help you to decide how you would dress in the interview. No, I want you to remember the sit-down test. And I know some people might have never heard about this before, but this is exactly as it is described. I want you to try on your clothing before the interview date and have a seat in a chair and see how it settles in. Does your dress or your skirt right up too much? These are things you want to take note of. And, COVID, for some of us, we put on a few pounds during COVID. And so you want to make sure that you try on these clothes, especially for that reason. Does everything fit the way that it should? Does it still look nice and neat and snug? Is it too tight? So this is important as well. And because times are always changing, back a couple years ago, black and white were the only two colors that were recommended for interviews. But I say this to you, you can incorporate color. I'm not telling you to go down to your interview in a fluorescent dress or in something that is too bright or too outlandish, but you can incorporate your blues, your greens, your pinks, depending on the shade. Shade is everything. Incorporate them into your colors and you should be fine. And remember that you don't want to wear flat shoes. I know that there's some females who have an issue with comfort and the heels. So if that is you, you can consider a kitten heel, because it still gives you a slight lift and a bit of elegance while still being comfortable. And on Friday, you will be guided through the whole concept of personal branding. So you will learn that dressing for success starts way before the interview. Next slide.
Oh, wait, I just wanted to add to that before, Tiffany, if you can go back just a little bit, because I know sometimes when I guess when we go out or whatever the case may be, we know we like to wear a lot of jewelry. I'm not sure if it's a Caribbean thing or whatever the case may be, but certainly with respect to jewelry, I always tell people less is more. A subtle elegance speaks volumes. So when you're going to the job interview, try to lose the jewelry. If you're a person who is accustomed to wearing a lot of bangles and chains and so on, you certainly want to lose those. If you're a female, you have a nice pair of bob earrings or whatever the case may be, you can wear those, but try to reduce the volume and just be subtle elegance speaks volumes. Yeah, so a minimal amount of jewelry.
Yeah. And one quote that I remembered with that comment is, simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication.
Indeed.
Yes. So to close off our presentation, we just want to take you through what happens after the interview. It's over. Now what? It doesn't end there. We want you to remember to send out your thank you email, at least the most being 48 hours after, but I recommend within 24 hours. So this is what you want to address in the thank you email. You want to express your gratitude for the opportunity, mention the interviewers by name, and this is why the notebook and the pen is important. You want to mention at least one thing that you like about the company. This comes from your research and also from paying attention in the interview. And you want to remind them why you are the best candidate. And this isn't a story. This isn't a letter. This is just a one paragraph kind of email communication. to send off, just to express your gratitude. And this isn't something that a lot of candidates do. So you will be remembered for the right reason.
Agreed. And in addition to that thank you email, which you should do, as Tiffany mentioned, quite promptly, you also want to follow up. Particularly in a very corporate environment, there can be numerous applications being submitted to that company, and you want to make sure that the information is not lost. Because again, companies can have cross-functional groups where information flows from side by side, or it can have a very hierarchical structure where the information then needs to, you interview with an interview panel, and then the interview panel then needs to give their recommendations to a board or to a director, and then directors or the board need to then decide. So that can also take time. So you don't want you certainly don't want to let it be lost upon you, but after that 2 week period, you just want to, I would recommend to send an email if you haven't heard correspondence in about 2 weeks. And then after you send that email, you can then follow up with a call 2 days after, just giving the person some time to respond in that 48-hour window. And once that is done, hopefully you follow all the tips and tricks, and you will certainly land the job.
Yes, definitely.
So that concludes our presentation. So if you have any questions for us, we'll be more than willing to take them and to advise you accordingly. Preferably Tiffany, she's the expert.
That's all right.
Oh man, that was amazing. Guys, thank you so much. We do have a lot of questions, and we have just 15 minutes left, so I'm going to get right to them. The first one is from Kadisha Compton, and she asks, what do you suggest for someone who is new to the workplace? For example, most employers will ask for experience. How would you respond to this? Maybe if you're a student who's just joining the workforce.
Okay, so sorry, go ahead, Chad.
Oh, well, I was really piggybacking on you because I think you also touched upon it during the actual presentation. We spoke about, for those students who don't necessarily have the work experience, perhaps you would have done an associate degree at BCC or at one of the universities. You want to be able to showcase that you can leverage your project experience, whether it is that you did a dissertation or thesis or any group work. You want to be able to show that how this group project or this work that you would have done as a student, how can you transfer those skills and that experience into the job market?
Yes, definitely agree with Chad there. In the event that the person that Kadisha is asking in terms of getting an interview, though, how to go about that without experience, what I would strongly recommend is to engage in community work and to do some volunteering. Now, I know a lot of persons sometimes tend not to want to do that because it doesn't always pay, but it doesn't pay in dollars and cents, but certainly in experience. And that is something nobody can take from you. So you can then use the experience that you gain through volunteerism and leverage it on your resume as something that employers can, see as value and then want to call you. So definitely you want to gain some volunteerism under your belt. And if you're a student at university, do not forget that there are a lot of clubs that you can join as well. There's Rotaract, there's the Key Club. You may, depending on the certification that you are receiving at university, there may be a club for that specifically. So if you're an accountant, there's one for that, there's one for social work. So you want to get involved.
That's really interesting. Another question is from Hazel Ann Laldi, and her question is, if the question of salary is not raised by the person who's conducting the interview, should she ask for the salary range?
Okay, so I would say that you can ask, but make sure it's not the first question that you ask. So we would have gone through 3 of them that you could ask in your interview. You could make the salary question the last one and ask them what they would have budgeted for the position.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Next one is from Kababy Melissa. What if you're asked a question that you cannot answer right there in the midst of the interview?
Okay, so yeah, so this is something that happens quite often. Now, what Chad and I agreed on is the fact that you don't want to answer a question without understanding what they're asking or without having a concrete answer, and you don't want to answer just for answering sake. So ask them to repeat or to rephrase the question if you're not too sure. And you don't necessarily want to be the person that says, can we come back to that, because we probably wouldn't have the time to come back to it. So give it your best shot. And this is one of the reasons why doing the research and practicing is also very important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. One of the things actually that when you do diplomacy training, you actually learn about some of the things that you can, a way in terms that you can buy time to actually formulate a good answer. And a simple thing is asking the interviewer to repeat or to rephrase, even though you heard it the first time, would allow you that additional 30 seconds to just to gather your thoughts. So the question is a little big, so I'm not sure what she's speaking to directly. However, you always want to make sure that you can answer the question to the best of your ability. And if it is that you simply don't understand the question, don't be afraid to ask the interviewer to rephrase or to simply ask the question again.
The next question is from Sue Monerville. And the question is to Tiffany. Tiffany, what if you are working already, but you are not comfortable or you do not like where you are? How do you go about, the question, why have you applied for this position?
Right. So that's a good question, Sue. I think in Chad's response, it would have pretty much covered this one. So again, you want to be honest and truthful. So you're not going to say necessarily the first half of what Chad said about the fact that you work with some really good colleagues and you like the culture. But you, of course, I'm certain would have learned a thing or two while on that job. And that is what we want you to focus on. So you can just say to them, where I work right now has definitely contributed to my professional and personal development. But when I saw this job ad, I believe that it can definitely take me to the place that I want to be in my career and can utilize even a greater part of my skill set and my core competencies.
Agreed.
This is an interesting question. This is by Sun Blossom. And they ask, can you advise on how to prepare for an interview for a position within your company in which you're already employed? Is there different best practices? What do you guys think?
Well, for me, you already have an advantage because you most definitely know the company culture. You probably know who you're going to be interviewing with. So you need to practice the questions. You need to practice questions that you think will come in that interview based on your knowledge of the job and obviously the company that you're working in. So focus on practicing those behavioral and competency-based questions, and make sure that even though you are familiar with the person that you're probably going to be interviewing with, that you don't get too comfortable. Because I find that persons who interview for internal positions tend to get comfortable. Don't get comfortable in the position, maintain your professionalism, and you should be fine.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add there, particularly if it is a cross-sectional movement or upward movement, you also want to be able to speak to the fact of your own competency in your current position and how you can leverage that competency into the additional or to the new position that you want to go into.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Next one is a question from Ju Lee. Do you think it's okay to wear open-toe heels to an interview?
So I know this is something for me an old adage that I would have come up hearing, closed toe. Personally, for me it's either or. I don't have a requirement or a preference of the two. But if you're comfortable if you prefer closed toe, well, go right ahead. But for me, open toe shoes isn't going to stop you from getting a job.
Okay. Next one is from Kessiana Miggins. How do you suggest to answer the question where do you see yourself in 5 years? But let's say later on they ask, how long do you plan to stay in the company?
Okay. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? You want to focus on being of value to the company. So you don't want to necessarily mention something that straight off the bat, they know that you're probably going to be gone in the next year or two. So, just reiterate the fact that you see yourself in the company having developed continually, having opportunities to perhaps cross train, and again, to add value to that company that you're interviewing with, being the go to person of the company, being very knowledgeable and highly respected in the organization.
When there's a follow-up question from Lee, which is when asked about your weaknesses, what should one person generally say? Oh, this is you guys already
Yeah,
about
well, again, yeah, again, we don't want you to use a generic weakness. We want your weakness to actually be factual. So I can't advise you what you should actually say as a weakness or list as a weakness. However, we can tell you the thing, whatever you list as your actual weakness, you must be able to again indicate to the panel that you're in the process of doing something about that weakness, and to make that weakness a strength in the future. So I can't give you an answer to say, oh, use the lack of proficiency as your weakness. But again, you always want to show that you're actively working and actively seeking to improve to make sure that that weakness turns into a strength for you.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Now, I actually have a follow-up question in terms of dress code for the interview. I mean, doesn't that take into account the kind of industry? So let's say if you're a creative or if you were in the arts, then maybe the suit and tie, you might have to lose that. What is your guys' suggestion about that?
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sure. So again, it's all about doing your research and knowing the actual industry that you're in. So again, if it is that you're applying to a very corporate environment, maybe a financial institution, an advisory company, or whatever the case may be, then again, you want to dress formal. If it is a marketing company, or one of those new edge companies, you can dress casual. You want to show your creative side. Maybe you want to add a splash of color somewhere to show that, yes, you are very fashionable and marketable and so on. And also for those persons who also are looking to go into the digital companies, you will see that personnel will go to work in short pants and so on and so forth. So it's really about knowing the industry that you're seeking to work in, and then dressing accordingly. So again, you have the formal, with a bit of color in it, and flair and a personality, I think is a better word. And then if you can also have the informal companies where they dress in informal wear. But I would still recommend at the minimum, when you're doing that interview, the interview itself, to go at the minimum business casual or at maximum formal.
I got two quick questions from people. One is from Lamar Watkins. Any tips on posture within the interview setting? What questions about a posture? And then the question from Granville McSheen, which is it best to ask about a salary scale or like insurance, holiday, and other benefits in the job during your first interview?
Okay, so I think Chad would have addressed the posture when he spoke about preparation and practice, but obviously you're not going to slouch, so you want to sit erect. And if you're a person that uses your hands a lot, put them in your lap, please. We don't want to get distracted. But, a nice erect posture, not too stiff, but not too relaxed either.
Oh, and I know we're soon out of time, but if I can just go back a little bit to that dress, particularly now that we are in this COVID environment, you may be actually doing a lot of interviews virtually. So for the men out there, yes, you want to wear a nice upright, and if you want to be in a short pants underneath, then then so be it. Just don't stand up. That's the only caveat. But again, it's a similar thing. But again, obviously, you're using a webcam or whatever the case may be. So whatever they're seeing, you want that to be business casual or formal.
And quickly, just to answer the other question, again, this is back to the question the other person would have asked about asking about your salary. It's essentially the same thing because it's benefits. Make sure that those aren't the first set of questions that you ask. You can preface it with the more stimulating questions that will help you to look as though you're thinking outside the box. And then you go toward those type of questions regarding your benefits.
Agreed.
All right. Well, there are some more questions, but this is all the time we have. We've already reached the 1 hour mark. So Tiffany, Chad, I want to thank you guys so much for imparting these awesome nuggets of wisdom. I think that it has been super helpful, super informative. I want to thank you guys so much. And that concludes the second part in our 3-part series on professional development. This is the program between the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors and the U.S. Embassy. Tune in for Friday. Friday is our last session, and that is going to be on the new normal, marketing yourself in 2020. And we're going to have with us the other CARICOM Youth Ambassador for Barbados, Tashatha Jeffrey. She's also my partner in crime. And she's also the writer and copy editor at Jot and Tittle. And then also we will have Corey McLean, who is founder of Sips Smoothie Bar and Refuel Barbados. Is going to talk about personal branding, using social media in order to really build your brand in 2020. So this is definitely something not to miss. Guys, thank you again so much. And I hope that everybody has a great day. Take care.
Thank you very much for having us.
Bye. Thank you.